The beeping of the machines was the only sound that kept me company in that cold, sterile hospital room. The white walls, the faint scent of disinfectant, and the heavy blanket over my frail body all made me feel smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I had been admitted after a sudden collapse in my kitchen. One moment I was making myself a cup of tea, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up to bright fluorescent lights and nurses rushing around me. They said it was my heart. Years of working 2 jobs, sacrificing for my family, and neglecting my own health had caught up with me. What cut deeper than the pain in my chest, however, was the silence. I had raised 3 children. 3 children who once clung to my legs and begged me to read them bedtime stories. And yet now, as I lay in this hospital bed, not one of them had shown up. The nurses would glance at me with that polite pity, the kind they reserved for patients who had no visitors. Each passing day, the phone on the table by my bed remained silent. I told myself maybe they were busy. My eldest, Thomas, worked in finance, always buried in numbers and deals. My middle child, Caroline, was a lawyer herself. Ironic, considering how things would turn out. And she rarely made time for family gatherings anymore. And then there was Michael, my youngest, my sweet boy who once promised he would never abandon me. But now even he was nowhere to be found. On the 3rd night, I asked a nurse, "Did anyone call for me today?" She gave me that same look, her lips tightening. "I'm sorry, sir, not today." I turned my head toward the window, hiding the sting in my eyes. Outside, the city moved on, cars rushing by, lights glowing in the distance. Life went on without me, just as my family seemed to be doing. On the 5th day, I gathered the courage to call Caroline myself. My hands trembled as I held the phone. When she picked up, her voice was sharp, as though I was interrupting something important. "Dad, I'm in the middle of a case. Can this wait?" I swallowed hard. "Sweetheart, I'm in the hospital. I thought you should know." There was a pause, then a sigh. "I'll try to come by when I have time. But you know how busy I am. Maybe Thomas can visit instead." Her words sliced through me. She didn't even ask what had happened. She didn't ask if I was scared or if I was lonely. When I tried calling Thomas, he barely let me speak before saying, "Dad, I'm in a meeting. I'll check in later, all right?" And then the line went dead. Michael didn't even answer. Straight to voicemail. That night, I wept silently into my pillow. I wasn't afraid of dying. Not really. I was afraid of dying alone, forgotten by the very people I had given everything to. The nurses began to notice. One of them, a kind young woman named Lily, stayed by my side longer than she needed to. She adjusted my blanket and whispered, "You deserve better than this. Families should show up." Her kindness warmed me, but it also fueled a new flame inside me. I had spent my whole life giving. My time, my money, my health. And now, when I needed them most, my family had abandoned me. On the 7th day, something shifted. I received a visit. Not from my children, but from an old friend. George, my neighbor from years ago, walked into my room with a bouquet of daisies. "Thought you could use some company," he said, pulling up a chair. I broke down then. "George, they haven't come. Not once. Not a call, not a visit." He put a hand on mine and shook his head. "You don't deserve that. But maybe it's time you think about what you do deserve. You've given them everything. Maybe it's time they learn what life, without your sacrifices, looks like." That night, I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my head. What did I deserve? Respect. Care, love. And if they wouldn't give it to me willingly, maybe I needed to remind them of just how much they stood to lose. The following morning, I asked Lily for a pen and paper. My hand shook as I wrote the name of my lawyer at the top of the page. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Franklin in years, but I knew he was still practicing. I had kept my affairs in order, my will neatly tucked away, my assets carefully divided, though always in favor of my children. But now things would change. By the end of the week, the lawyer walked into my room, briefcase in hand. The same day, word finally reached my children that something serious was happening at the hospital. Suddenly, they appeared, faces full of fake concern, rushing into the room as if they had been there all along. But it was too late, because the lawyer had already arrived. The door swung open, and in walked Thomas first, his expensive suit still perfectly pressed, the smell of his cologne entering before he did. Caroline followed, her heels clicking against the hospital floor like a metronome of impatience. Finally, Michael trailed behind, his phone still in his hand, as he muttered something under his breath. They looked around the room as if stepping into unfamiliar territory, their expressions carefully composed. "Dad," Thomas said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We came as soon as we heard." I studied him quietly. Heard what, exactly? That I was sick? Or that the lawyer was here? The silence that fell was thick enough to choke on. Caroline crossed her arms, defensive as always. "You could have called us sooner. We're busy people, Dad. You can't expect us to drop everything at a moment's notice." Busy. That word had become their shield, their excuse for every absence, every missed birthday, every lonely holiday. I wanted to scream, to ask if they had been too busy when they needed braces, or tuition, or money for their first cars. But I stayed calm. My heart was fragile now, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Michael finally slipped his phone into his pocket and leaned closer. "Dade, we didn't know it was this serious. We're here now. That's what matters." I met his eyes. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw guilt buried there. But then, like a cloud passing over the sun, it vanished. At that moment, Mr. Franklin, my lawyer, entered the room. He was an older man, his hair completely silver now, but his presence commanded attention. He set his briefcase on the small hospital table and adjusted his glasses. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice firm. "I see the family has finally arrived." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "What's going on here? Why is he?" She gestured toward Mr. Franklin, "involved?" "Because," I interrupted, my voice steady, "I asked him to be." The tension in the room grew heavier, and even the machines seemed to beep more loudly in the silence. "Mr. Franklin cleared his throat. "Your father has made some important decisions regarding his estate and his future care. He wanted me present to ensure there is no confusion." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Estate? What are you talking about?" "Dad, you're not." "Ding." I finished for him. "I don't know, Thomas. The doctors say it could go either way. But what I do know is that lying in this bed gave me a lot of time to think. Time to remember all the years I worked myself to the bone to make sure you never went hungry, never wore worn-out shoes, never had to choose between school and survival. And yet, when I ended up here alone, not one of you came." Caroline stepped forward. "Dad, that's not fair. We had responsibilities. More important than me." I asked softly, but the words struck her like a slap. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. I turned to Mr. Franklin. "Please, explain." He nodded and opened his briefcase, pulling out a neat stack of documents. "Your father had previously divided his estate equally among the three of you. However, after recent events, he has decided on changes." The color drained from their faces. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. Caroline's lips pressed into a thin line, and Michael's eyes darted nervously between me and the papers. "Changes?" Thomas demanded. "What kind of changes?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned back against my pillow, feeling the power shift in the room for the first time in years. "The kind that reflect reality," I said finally. "The kind that make sure my loyalty and love aren't wasted on people who can't even show up when it matters most." Michael stepped forward, desperation leaking into his voice. "Dad, come on, this isn't necessary. We made mistakes, sure, but we're here now. We'll do better. Just give us a chance." I looked at him, at all of them. Their faces weren't full of love or regret. They were full of fear. Fear of losing money. Fear of losing what they thought they were entitled to. And for the first time, I realized they weren't afraid of losing me. "Mr. Franklin," I said, my voice clear and strong despite the weakness in my body. "Read it to them." The lawyer adjusted his glasses again and began to speak, each word deliberate, slicing through the silence like a knife. And as he read, I watched the expressions on my children's faces shift, from confusion to shock, and finally, to the kind of regret that comes too late. Mr. Franklin's voice was steady, every syllable striking like a gavel in a courtroom. "This revised will stipulates that the majority of your father's estate, including the family home, savings accounts, and investments, will no longer be divided equally among his 3 children. Instead, he has chosen to allocate the bulk of his assets elsewhere, with specific instructions that I am legally bound to follow." The room went silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside me. My children's faces told the story better than words could. Thomas's face flushed red, his composure cracking as he clenched his fists. Caroline's jaw dropped slightly before she snapped it shut, eyes blazing. Michael, however, looked the most stricken, his lips parting as though he wanted to protest, but couldn't form the words. "What do you mean elsewhere?" Caroline's voice was sharp, venomous. "Dad, this is absurd. We're your family. Who else could you possibly leave it to?" I took a deep breath. My chest ached, but I refused to let it show. Family isn't only about blood, Caroline. Family is about who shows up when you need them most. And while you were all too busy, someone did show up. Someone who made sure I wasn't left to rot alone in this bed. Thomas slammed his palm against the side of the bed. "You can't be serious! You're going to throw away decades of providing for us, your own children. For what? Some nurse. Some stranger. Lily, the nurse who had cared for me day after day, happened to walk by the open door just then. She froze, startled by his raised voice, and I caught her eye. I gave her a faint smile, silently thanking her for everything. "It's not about throwing anything away," I said firmly, my voice shaking but resolute. "It's about giving to those who actually value me. Lily has shown more kindness to me in these past 2 weeks than you 3 combined have in years. And George, my old neighbor, he came without being asked. He brought me flowers, he sat by me when I cried. Tell me, Thomas, when was the last time you even asked how I was feeling?" My words hit him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mr. Franklin continued, his professional tone cutting through the tension. "Per your father's updated instructions, a significant portion of his estate will go toward funding a charitable trust in his name, designed to support elderly individuals abandoned by their families. Additionally, he has designated specific personal gifts to both George and Nurse Lily in recognition of their support during his illness." Caroline's face went pale. This is insane. You can't do this, Dad. You raised us. Everything you earned was for us. You told us that our whole lives. I nodded slowly. Yes, I did. And I meant it. But I also believed you would stand by me when it mattered. I thought I was raising children who understood loyalty and love. I was wrong. Michael finally stepped forward, his voice breaking. Dad, please, don't do this. I know we weren't here, but I regret it, I swear I do. Just give us another chance. For a brief moment, my heart softened. I saw in him the little boy who used to hold my hand and beg me never to leave him. But then I remembered the days I spent staring at the door, hoping he would walk through, and the silence that answered me instead. Regret after the fact means nothing, I whispered. When I was alone, you weren't there. That silence, it spoke louder than anything you're saying now. But Thomas shot up from his chair, pacing like a caged animal. This is ridiculous. You're being manipulated, Dad. By that lawyer, by these strangers. You're not thinking straight. You're sick. Your mind isn't clear. Mr. Franklin's eyes narrowed. I assure you, your father is of sound mind. We've discussed this at length, and I've confirmed his capacity to make these decisions. If you attempt to challenge this legally, I can guarantee the courts will uphold his wishes. The fury in Thomas's face melted into something else. Fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing his lifestyle. Caroline looked the same, calculating, already thinking of loopholes. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I leaned forward as much as my weak body allowed. I gave you everything. And when the time came for you to give me something as simple as your presence, you couldn't. That choice has consequences. This is mine. The air in the room grew heavy with their silence. The lawyer packed up the documents with calm precision, his briefcase snapping shut like the sound of finality. For the first time in years, I felt something unexpected, a sense of control, power. I had been weak and forgotten, but now I was reminding them of something they had taken for granted. I still had the final word. As they sat there stunned, I looked each of them in the eye and said softly, You refused to visit me. You left me alone when I needed you most. And now, you'll regret it when the lawyer arrives, because he already has. The silence in the room was unbearable, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hiss of the oxygen tube near my bed. My children sat frozen, their faces masks of disbelief and anger. It was almost poetic. How quickly love vanished when money was on the line. Caroline was the first to speak, her voice trembling not with sadness, but with rage. You can't just erase us from your life like this. We're your children. Everything you have, every cent, you earned for us. It's our legacy. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Legacy. You think my legacy is just money? My legacy was the years of sweat on my brow, the sleepless nights when you were sick, the sacrifices I made so you could live better than I ever did. But you turned it into numbers, into a dollar sign. That's not a legacy. That's greed. Her mouth fell open, but no words came. Thomas, always the hothead, leaned forward, his knuckles white against the bed rail. If you think this will stand, you're mistaken. I'll challenge it in court. You're not in your right mind. A judge will see that. Before I could answer, Mr. Franklin stepped in, calm and measured. You're welcome to try Mr. Hayes. But as your father's attorney, I can assure you I've documented everything. Medical evaluations, witness testimony, proof of his clear state of mind. A legal battle would only drain your time and your reputation. And given your profession, Mr. Hayes, he glanced at Thomas. You know how damaging that could be. Thomas's face turned crimson. He looked like he wanted to punch something, but couldn't decide whether it should be the lawyer or me. Michael, however, was different. He hadn't said much, but his eyes, red and wet, finally met mine. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I should have been here. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing, and that was worse. But please, don't cut me out completely. Please." His words cut deeper than his siblings' anger, because unlike them, his regret felt real. I saw a flicker of the boy I used to know, the boy who held my hand when his mother passed, the boy who used to cry if I left him too long at school. For a moment, I closed my eyes, letting the weight of his words settle. When I opened them again, I said softly, "Michael, fear is no excuse. Love shows itself in action, not just words. And when I was lying here, waiting, you weren't there." That silence, it spoke louder than any apology. His head dropped, and a tear slid down his cheek. Caroline stood abruptly, her heels clacking like a judge's gavel. "This is pointless. He's already made up his mind. Let's go." But Thomas didn't move. He glared at me, his voice low and cold. "You'll regret this, old man. When you're gone, we'll see who really gets the last word." I met his gaze without fear. "I may not be here forever, Thomas, but my decisions will outlive me. That is the last word." He didn't reply. He stormed out, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Caroline followed, muttering curses under her breath. Only Michael lingered, standing by the door, torn between leaving with his siblings and staying by my side. After a long pause, he whispered, "I love you, Dad," and then slipped out, leaving me alone once more. But I wasn't really alone. Mr. Franklin gave me a nod, his expression unreadable but respectful. "You did well," he said. "Sometimes, standing up to your own blood is the hardest thing a man can do." When he left, the room fell quiet again. I lay back against my pillow, exhausted but strangely lighter. For the first time in years, I felt like I had finally spoken my truth. Over the next few days, my children didn't return. Not a call, not a visit. Part of me hoped Michael might come back, that his words had been genuine. But the door remained closed, and the silence remained constant. Instead, it was Lily who checked in, always with that gentle smile. She brought me warm tea when the hospital coffee was too bitter. She adjusted my blankets without me asking. She even snuck in a small radio so I could listen to old jazz records late at night. And George, dear old George, came again, telling me stories from the neighborhood, making me laugh until the heart monitor beeped too quickly, and the nurses scolded us both. It was in those quiet moments I realized something profound. Blood may tie people together, but love is what makes a family. And sometimes, the family you choose shows up in ways the one you're born with never will. But my story with my children wasn't finished yet. Because while I was finding peace in the company of strangers and friends, they were plotting. Their greed hadn't disappeared, it had only grown sharper. And soon, they would come back, not with love or apologies, but with something else entirely. The storm came a week later. I should have expected it. The silence from my children wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And when the door to my hospital room opened that morning, it wasn't just them who walked in. Thomas and Caroline entered side by side, their faces hard as stone, and behind them came a man in a navy blue suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Dad," Thomas said, his tone slick, rehearsed. "This is Mr. Daniels. He's an attorney." I raised an eyebrow. "Your attorney?" Caroline crossed her arms. "O's. We want to be sure you're not being manipulated. It's clear to us that someone has gotten into your head, This nurse, that old neighbor, even your lawyer. You're not thinking clearly. Mr. Daniels stepped forward with a polite but cold smile. Mr. Hayes, your children are concerned. They believe your current state may impair your judgment. It would be wise to reconsider these dramatic changes to your estate. I felt a fire rise in me, one I thought had burned out years ago. So that's what this is about. Not my health. Not my loneliness. Not the fact that you left me alone in this bed. It's about the money. Thomas's jaw tightened. Don't make this about feelings, Dad. This is about what's fair. Fair? I laughed bitterly. Fair is visiting your father when he's ill. Fair is showing up when he calls. Fair is love. You abandoned me, and now you dare to speak of fairness. Caroline's face flushed with anger. We're not abandoning you. We're protecting what you promised us. Everything you earned for your family. That's what you said for years. That's what Mom believed. The mention of her, of my late wife, hit me like a blow to the chest. I could almost hear her voice, soft but firm, reminding me that family was supposed to be a bond unbreakable by greed. My eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. I did say that, I admitted quietly, and I meant it. But I also believed my children would honor me with love, not just wait like vultures circling for their inheritance. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, I strongly suggest you allow me to review your documents with you. If you continue down this path, your children will be forced to contest your will. It will get ugly. This doesn't have to end in court. Before I could answer, the door opened again, and in walked Mr. Franklin, my lawyer, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. He set his briefcase down with deliberate force, as if claiming the territory. Mr. Daniels, he said, shaking his head. Already trying to bully my client. How predictable. The room crackled with tension as the two lawyers locked eyes. Mr. Franklin turned to me. Don't say another word, Mr. Hayes. I'll handle this. Thomas scoffed. Handle it. My father isn't making rational choices. He's being manipulated, and we won't stand by and let it happen. Mr. Franklin smirked, pulling out a thick folder from his case. Funny you should say that. I have signed statements from hospital staff confirming your father's mental clarity. I also have medical evaluations declaring him fully competent to manage his affairs. And if this does go to court, we'll be happy to share the hospital's visitation records. Records that show not one of you bothered to visit until you learned I was involved. Caroline stiffened, her face paling. Furthermore, Mr. Franklin continued, his voice now like steel, your father's wishes are legally binding. Challenge them if you like. But I'll make sure every detail of your neglect comes to light. Imagine what the public will think of three wealthy, successful children who left their father to die alone while strangers cared for him. Do you think your reputations will survive that? Thomas's fists clenched, but he said nothing. Caroline looked away, shame creeping across her features. Michael wasn't there that day. Perhaps it was better that way. I finally spoke, my voice quiet but cutting. You came here thinking you could intimidate me into undoing my choices. But all you've done is prove I made the right decision. You didn't come with love. You came with lawyers. For the first time, Thomas faltered. His confidence cracked, his bravado slipping. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. Mr. Franklin packed up his folder with a crisp snap. This conversation is over. My client has spoken. His decisions stand. The silence that followed was suffocating. Thomas and Caroline turned and left without another word, their attorney trailing behind them. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in days, I could breathe again. Mr. Franklin placed a hand on my shoulder. They'll come around or they won't. Either way, you've taken back your power. Rest easy now. As he left, I lay back, staring at the ceiling. The battle wasn't over. I could feel it. My children weren't done trying. But neither was I. Because now, for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to fight back. The final chapter of this story unfolded not in the quiet of my hospital room, but in a place far more formal, far more unforgiving, the reading of my will. Weeks had passed since my confrontation with Thomas and Caroline. I had regained some strength, enough to be discharged, though the doctors warned me my heart was fragile. Fragile or not, I was determined to see this through. The day of the reading, the air was thick with tension. My children sat in a row at the polished oak table of Mr. Franklin's office. Thomas in his dark suit, his expression tight with barely contained anger. Caroline with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue, arms crossed defensively, and Michael, sitting apart from them, shoulders slumped, his face pale with guilt. George was there too, seated quietly in the corner, his presence steady and grounding, and Lily, the nurse who had become like family, had come at my invitation. She looked uncomfortable, as though she didn't belong, but I gave her a reassuring smile. She belonged here more than my own blood. Mr. Franklin began, his voice calm and deliberate, as he opened the thick envelope containing my will. We are gathered here today to review the final wishes of Mr. Hayes. These documents are legally binding and have been witnessed and notarized in accordance with the law. What is written here reflects his decisions, and his alone. Thomas leaned forward. Get on with it. The lawyer ignored him and continued. Per Mr. Hayes's instructions, a significant portion of his estate will be used to establish the Hayes Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to supporting elderly individuals who, like Mr. Hayes, find themselves abandoned by their families in their later years. This foundation will provide housing, medical care, and companionship programs. Caroline let out an audible scoff, her nails tapping against the table. You've got to be kidding me. Mr. Franklin didn't pause. Additionally, personal gifts have been set aside for 2 individuals. George Miller, in recognition of his years of friendship and his support during Mr. Hayes's illness, will receive a financial stipend and lifetime rights to the Hayes Lake cabin. Nurse Lily Bennett, for her extraordinary compassion and care, will receive a financial gift sufficient to cover her student loans and provide a secure future. Lily's hand shot to her mouth, eyes wide. Mr. Hayes, I can't accept this. You will, I said softly. You earned it. Thomas slammed his fist on the table. This is outrageous! You're giving away our inheritance to strangers. Mr. Franklin raised a hand. I'm not finished. He adjusted his glasses and went on. A's for Mr. Hayes's children. Caroline Hayes will receive a modest portion, enough to acknowledge her as his daughter, but not enough to constitute the bulk of his estate. Thomas Hayes will receive the same. Thomas jumped to his feet. Modest. After everything we've done. I cut him off sharply. Everything you've done. You mean leaving me to rot in a hospital bed while you chased money and status? Don't you dare call that something. His mouth snapped shut, his face purple with rage. Mr. Franklin turned the final page. And to Michael Hayes, your father has chosen to leave a larger portion, conditional upon certain requirements. Michael's head jerked up, startled. Conditional? I nodded, my eyes locking with his. Yes. You showed regret, Michael. You showed something human, something your brother and sister buried long ago. But regret without action is meaningless. If you want what I've left for you, you must serve on the board of the Hayes Foundation for no less than 5 years. You must put your time and effort into helping those abandoned like me. Only then will you inherit what I've set aside for you." Michael's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded without hesitation. "I'll do it, Dad. I swear I will." Caroline scoffed. "Unbelievable. You're rewarding him for crying." I turned to her, my voice colder than ice. "No, I'm giving him a chance to prove he can be better. Something you and Thomas never even tried to do." The room fell silent. Thomas seethed, Caroline fumed, and Michael wept quietly, clutching the pen as he signed the agreement to accept the condition. Mr. Franklin closed the will with finality. "It is done. These are your father's wishes, and they will be carried out." I looked at my children one last time. You refused to visit me. You left me alone when I needed you most. And now, you'll live with the knowledge that love, not blood, defines family. That's the legacy I leave behind." Caroline stormed out, muttering under her breath. Thomas followed, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. But Michael stayed, tears on his cheeks, his hand gripping mine. George placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, and Lily whispered a soft thank you, still overwhelmed. And in that moment, I felt peace. Because though my blood had failed me, my heart had not. I had found family in unexpected places, and I had left behind more than money. I had left behind a message. In the end, my children did regret it. Not because of what they lost, but because of what they threw away long before the lawyer ever arrived. The beeping of the machines and the ticking of the clock no longer haunted me. For the first time, I felt that my story had closed on my terms, and that was enough.